Welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Futureproofing Fulfillment, What SMBs Need in WMS and Shipping for 2026. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We have a few different platforms that are leveraging today. To the webinar platform attendees, please engage with us through the Q&A widget. Members of our team are standing by to answer your questions. We also have some helpful links displayed, so check those out while we get started here. LinkedIn Live attendees, please engage with us through chat, and members of our team are standing by to answer any of your questions. We'll be putting helpful links out to the audience through chat. Both platforms, if we can't get to your questions live today, a member of our team will reach out post-webinar to answer those questions for you. We do have some panelists today. To start, I'm going to be your moderator. I'm Gila Reiser. I am the director of the integration team here at ProShip. And then our three speakers we have Tony Barrell. He is the VP of Sales at ProShip. Then we have Eric Levine. He is the Enterprise Sales Executive at ProShip. And then we have Charles Pearson, who is the President of Sphere WMS. So thanks to all of you for being here today. We really appreciate it. All right, now let's get started and not waste any more time and dive right into the heart of today's conversation. The parcel shipping landscape is shifting, and it's shifting really fast. Small to mid-sized companies are feeling the pressure now more than ever before. Between rising costs, labor shortages, and peak season demand, the challenges are stacking up. To kick things off, Tony, can you talk us through the current state of the market and what trends you're seeing shaping fulfillment?
Sure. Thanks, Gila. Yeah, there's really there's probably more than what's on the slide and on this list, but definitely try and keep it concise here today. So certainly the state of the market is, I think everybody's feeling it, is just rising costs, right? Especially the last 18, 24 months, especially from the major four carriers, cost increases for freight expense, especially parcel, with accessorial changes, it is kind of averaged, I would say, or the number that you hear from a stat perspective is like potentially 30% increase, which is crazy hard for a company to absorb, right? And so I think, how do you do more with less, right? How do you spend more with the same amount of resources? And then how do you scale, right? And so, it's very timely we're having this webinar today, but obviously, we're getting into peak season, right? So it is a make or break season for a lot of businesses, puts a lot of demand. And so how do you scale to increase throughput, save in other areas while your costs are going up? It's a very kind of challenging market right now. For the SMB and mid-market, and then I would say the enterprise, but certainly SMB and mid-market, the rise of drop shipping definitely is bringing in now the need for more capabilities. Manufacturers are having to act like 3PLs. 3PLs are having to think like manufacturers as far as cost savings, efficiencies. I mean, 3PLs certainly are always about cost savings and efficiencies, but having to maximize the amount of flexibility and functionality in their enterprise, but obviously keep costs low. So rise in drop shipping is definitely not a new trend, I would say, but certainly just as at a fever pitch now with, e-com, how people buy from an e-com perspective is flooding into the B2B side of the world as well, too. And then last, similar to cost constraints or cost increases, carrier constraints, I would say this is more the confusion right now for shippers. So how do I navigate these waters of carrier uncertainty, right? Is an accessorial going to drop that increases my spend another 10% next week? What carriers don't have that accessorial increase? What carriers can perform? What happens if I go to 4 carriers instead of 2? Just a lot of kind of like questions in the air for the industry. So don't want to ramble on too much. I mean, a lot to unpack, but that definitely like is, I would say, our perspective from the state of the market and kind of what shippers are battling here in 2025.
Yeah, Tony, thanks for laying the foundation for this call because, like you said, those are a lot of good key points there. Eric or Charles, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just to, I guess, piggyback really quick off of what Tony was saying. I think the state of the industry can be summarized as rising costs and even larger rising costs. And the people that are going to feel it the most are going to be SMBs. So Tony mentioned a figure of about 30% increases in overall costs in the past 24 or so months. Obviously, it's an average. There's going to be some experiencing more, some less. The people that have less leverage with the carriers are probably going to be on the higher end of that average, if not exceeding it. So even though today's market can be seen as a shipper's market, we still haven't fully rebounded from pre-pandemic highs. Carriers still have excess capacity. For SMBs, it's going to feel like a carrier market. Less volume leads to less negotiating power. So when these large GRIs and accessorial hikes happen, they're going to be hit the hardest.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing is around the carrier constraints and the peak season impact. The shippers are really concerned. Are the carriers going to be there for them, and what do they need to do in the meantime to address it? We see people committing to trailers, ahead of time just to make sure that they're going to get service. So that's what we're seeing. That peak season is people have been burned in the past, and there's still a lot of heartburn around that from what happened during the COVID era, and so that's still a lot of concern.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks you guys for that. Now that we've got an overview of the current market, let's talk solutioning. Charles, let's talk about how WMS fits into those solutions. How can knowing shippers build a fulfillment program that's lean, scalable, and ready for what's next?
Yeah, when you think about the WMS, it really acts as a central hub that ties all the operational workflows together. When you do that, you can remove tribal knowledge and remove all the manual decision making that might be going on. You need a WMS that will integrate directly with your ERP system. This way you can get real-time updates for order entry, inventory levels, and customer data. In addition, the connectivity with online shopping carts is it's table stakes at this point. You have to have it that we can automatically feed the orders into the WMS, and then automation takes place. Then you get the pick, pack, and ship process happening after that. The WMS will optimize the picking routes in the warehouse. It helps you save time, save labor, and also verifies the order accuracy, and then generates all the shipping labels and the tracking information. So, as part of that, shipping is a key component, and using a multi-carrier shipping platform really enhances the process. It'll automatically compare rates and delivery times, and then depending upon what you need, whether you need something, what's more important, is it the price or the time to get it there? And then you can make that decision automatically. You can transfer back and forth between the two. Because if you have issues with your customers, that's the biggest thing. You don't want to burn orders. You don't want customer dissatisfaction. So having options is key. Because if one carrier experiences delays or service issues, then you just instantly reroute it to the other one or other ones without any manual intervention. That's what you need to be able to do. Another benefit that really isn't thought about very much is the RMA and return process. Sometimes this is just a stepchild that's handled manually. And so by having the right solution, all this can be automated and part of the normal course of business. Again, this will help you save on the labor costs and the workflow within the warehouse. So together, you're bringing all these technologies together, with a scalable fulfillment process that can grow with the business. It gives you the ability to save on labor. So as you go through these peaks and valleys of the seasons, then the process will work either way. And then as your business starts to scale, you really don't have to add a tremendous amount of labor because you already have the automation in place.
Yeah, excellent points. You really went over some really, really key things when it comes to the impact WMS can do for your business. So, Eric, Tony, do either of you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. I think the word that comes to my mind is flexibility, right? So like Charles kind of said, like foundational system, sometimes that, foundational or like a framework, I think the biggest thing is that really gives you that stability to grow and then scale as well. But it doesn't mean you need to give up like flexibility, right? And I think that's where meeting from a shipping perspective, meeting the WMS where shipping kind of picks up or you have overlap of functionality is ultimately good for a customer because it gives that flexibility of, all right, this location or maybe this one workflow or product type, I need this, execution steps or workflow to be executed. Maybe same facility, other location, you can obviously mix and match WMS shipping and maybe even some hardware equipment, right? Conveyor control systems, other desktop automation equipment as well. So flexibility is what I would add to Charles' point as far as like foundational system, but also then tailoring it to your business needs and more importantly, like it can change, right? And so in the dynamic nature that we live in, it's not a set it and forget it thing. So it could change over time and had to have that flexibility. Eric, Charles, if you had anything else.
Yeah, I love the word that you're using, flexibility here, and I kind of think about it from a different perspective. Leveraging the both systems together can be done completely differently because every company is very different, right? Some will put a larger emphasis on keeping all rules or all processes within the WMS, and they'll look at the shipping provider just as a solution that can print a compliant label. Others are going to have such a custom approach to their shipping department that it makes no sense to house all of those rules in the WMS, and they want to keep their WMS focusing on things that are happening into the warehouse prior to it getting to that packing station and initiating the shipping solution to start operating and doing all these different routing guides, picking the correct carriers. So you do need to be flexible as a system. I think the fact that our systems can work together to service the need of any customer gives us the ability to truly walk into any room and present a solution.
No, those are great. All right. So if there's nothing else, if anyone has any final statements, please feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is smart shipping strategies for SMB. So solutions are great for SMB. And then solutions are a great place to start, but they need to be backed by strategy. Shipping isn't just about getting packages out the door. It's about finding a way to do it smarter. Eric, can you talk us through some of the strategies for smarter shipping?
Yeah, of course, Gila. We talked a lot in the beginning about, rising costs. So this section is going to be extremely important. I'll try to keep it concise, but we could probably do an hour long just talking about these three topics here. But the reality is, when you look at the current market, SMBs are under pressure, whether it's carrier rate increases, fuel surcharges, and any other accessorials, staffing shortages, tight delivery expectations driven by the rest of the market. They're going to have to keep up and they're going to have to strategize to do these well. So this section, we're going to cover 3 key strategies to overcome these factors. We're going to start with rate shopping, especially in real time, carrier diversification, and automating shipping and compliance documentation. So before I dive deeper into rate shopping, I think it's important to define it just so everyone's on the same page here. What rate shopping is, it's automatically comparing carrier rates and transit times in real time at the time of shipment rather than using static routing guides. To give you an idea of the type of impact this can have on your business immediately just by rate shopping between a few carriers to larger than a few, you can typically save 6 to 8% of your parcel spend just by letting the system automatically pick the carrier service each time. So SMBs, and many of them, automatically default to using one carrier because of the perceived notion that they'll get better negotiated rates. But negotiated rates don't always mean the best rates, whether it's for every zone, weight, or service type. These are other factors you need to be taking into consideration when doing a rate calculation. What real-time rate shopping is going to allow is you'll get that evaluation from multiple carriers, whether it's just UPS, FedEx, USPS, and other national carriers, or you want to bring a few regionals into the mix. You can do this comparison simultaneously. They're going to factor in dim weight, fuel surcharges and those other accessorial fees such as residential surcharges and delivery commitments. When do you need to get it there in time? Which is going to allow you to choose the most cost-effective option that's going to meet the needed service level. Now, what you're going to achieve by automating this and not allowing the warehouse employee to make that decision based on their tribal knowledge on the floor, it's going to remove that responsibility while they're doing manual rate lookups and guesswork. It's also going to reduce the shipping time from minutes to seconds, if not milliseconds. And it's going to let operations focus on fulfillment, not freight math. So Tony, Charles, I would point it back to Sorry, go ahead, Gila.
No, I was just going to say, I was just talking to a client yesterday, and they're starting a little bit smaller, right? They're doing the crawl, walk, run piece, and right now they're in the crawl, so they're just putting in their carriers. They're not doing rate shopping yet, but they want to expand on that a little bit later because they do find that there is so much value in that, but they want to make sure that they get their foundation ready first before they move into that. And that kind of all ties back together with, what Tony was saying with foundation and now going into rate shopping. So it just all ties together. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
So Charles, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to say that exact same thing because that's what we see in the natural progression of a company. And as they grow, they may start with a single carrier, be single threaded, but it's very important to have the structure in place where you can start adding carriers. So if you think about that ahead of time, as you're building your business, as you're setting everything up, making sure that's available from the very beginning is beneficial. You may not be leveraging it today, but knowing that it's there when you're ready, is really the key component of it. So when you're thinking about shipping, when you're thinking about your WMS, you need to make sure that it's available and ready. That way it'll be in the box and you can go whenever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if sorry to keep adding here, but even if you guys turn on, a carrier or have to turn them off for a reason, you have that flexibility again. So absolutely. Tony, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you guys hit it on the head. Nothing to add to rate shopping.
All right. All right. Well, I was just going to say, sorry, Eric, if you wanted to say anything about carrier diversification or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll dive into both of those. I'll start off with carrier diversification, then I'll get thoughts from Charles and Tony before diving to the next section. But the key point we're trying to get across when we're talking about carrier diversification is that SMBs often feel tied to a single carrier, whether it's volume thresholds, relationship perks. They do not understand the need to expand or are reluctant to do so. But what they don't see is that carrier diversification can reduce risk, improve delivery speed, provide leverage. Not only does it save money to you and your business, but it's also going to immensely improve that customer experience that's going to keep bringing them back. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into the conversation surrounding why add carriers, even if it doesn't seem economical at first. And it can be summarized solely by it being a risk mitigation strategy. So you're going to avoid overdependence on one carrier's network. There could be surcharge outages. There could be carrier strikes. All of these things are going to just cripple your fulfillment process, and it can lead to labels not being able to get out the door. So even a small percentage of shipments that can go through a second carrier, they build that flexibility we discussed previously and can even provide you with competitive pricing based on where that parcel is going. Another thing you can implement is using regional carriers as a key strategy. A lot of companies only view the UPS, FedExes, USPSs, DHLs of the world as a reality if they don't have high volume. But to improve that customer experience, adding a few of these regionals will give you the ability to offer 1 to 2 day delivery at ground rates. They can even present lower accessorial fees, especially during the peak season when some of those larger carriers are limiting capacity for smaller companies, and present fewer surcharges. So you might perceive these regionals as smaller, but they've grown over the years. Look at the unified lasership on-track engine. It's now servicing both sides of the coast. And they can even be cheaper than these national carriers in specific situations. So again, just to emphasize this point, during peak season, a lot of these national carriers are going to often cap your volume. They could even delay pickups. And the first class of companies that are going to be impacted by this will be the SMBs. So regionals are going to help you maintain throughput and even provide some cost savings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, on
Charles,
this
by
one,
chance, do you have anything else?
yeah, on this one, it's interesting. The carrier diversification and rate shopping almost go together in certain instances. And I've seen it a lot where, a company will start off with certain products and then the product mix changes. And as that product mix changes, they start getting accessorial charges from their existing carriers. And then because they're not diversified, they really don't realize that there's other options out there. So that's really where the carrier diversification, that I see it comes into play a lot, because then you can send different types of product down different channels. And if you have those relationships established, then you can. Because your product mix can change over time. What you may start off in may not be where you end up. And those accessorials really add up. I mean, when we look at the savings in the past, when I've looked at different RFPs on this, based on accessorials, I mean, I've seen savings up to 20%, on shipping costs associated with this. And it's really around the diversification of the carriers and sending the products down the right channel.
Yeah, and that goes into actually something that I didn't cover, which is the more that you diversify, it's a direct correlation with the more that you have to consolidate and the more that you have to automate. So you don't want, if you're looking at someone doing the swivel chair approach, even though that's a little bit ancient now, of looking at 3 different screens where you have 3 different carrier portals up, you don't want that to grow to 6, 7 screens. You want to bring that all to one interface. You want to automate the decision making, like you're saying, if it's going down this line, automatically fulfill it with X amount of carriers, limit your rate shopping decision based on zones, put in all these different automation techniques to not only streamline your process, but present cost savings wherever you can.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be looking at those DIMs and understanding which carrier is best based on those DIMs, and and evaluating it for that. So that diversification, it is important. And yeah, you can't do it manually. I mean, those days are over. It's all about having the carriers in the shipping platform, they're ready to go to have that automated.
Yeah, I'm sure I know we'll tie some of this back into like WMS and visibility for sure. But I think, we'll wrap a nice bow on at the end of this webinar. But in rate shopping and carrier diversification, what just comes to mind for me is also like, this is like your ability to fight back, right? So we've all kind of like done a deal and, like, hey, that's not quite what I thought I was signing up for. I mean, the sophistication of carrier pricing now is like, it's not easy. The level of complexity of how these carriers do price, rate shopping, having comparisons of diversifying your carrier mix also, kind of keep some of those carriers honest, right? You get to benchmark, like, here's what I like about this one. Here's what I like about that one. But, having your eggs in one basket or a minimal subset of carriers, is an approach. But the carriers they're savvy. They negotiate for a living, right? And especially these accessorial increases.
I was just going to say that.
For customers, it's that's in the shadows is going to come out at some point, right? And so, diversifying will definitely help you. I guess see what else is out there, right? Even to Eric, to your point, it can only be a subset of your volume. It doesn't, diversifying doesn't mean you need to go 50-50 with 2 carriers, right? Or even across there. It really is finding those different tranches in your product mix, pricing tables that's a win-win. So
yeah, telling you to that point, I mean, we've seen 10% of the volume can create so much of the cost because of its uniqueness and things like that. So that's where it's just critically important that you've got diversification of carriers, for those different products.
Absolutely. So I know this is a great topic, but we can keep it moving here. I mean, shipping documents. Let's go to the next one, because carrier diversification we could beat that one pretty dead. From a shipping docs perspective, Eric, do you want to kick this off? You want me to take it?
No, I can start off here and you can jump in. I think this is the section here where there's the most overlap between a WMS and a shipping solution working together. For one, we're dependent on the WMS to give us the correct data. 2, it truly becomes a business decision when you're generating shipping and operational documents to decide which system is going to be responsible for it. So whether it's coming out of your WMS or it's coming out of your multi-carrier shipping solution, you're going to have the ability to automatically print packing lists, drop ship documentation like Tony was talking about earlier, branded inserts, a thank you card for a loyal customer, return forms like Charles was indicating prior. It's going to be directly from that order data that comes from your WMS. So I would say selfishly, one benefit of allowing the shipping solution to print these docs is that it ensures the paperwork prints at the same time or right after the carrier label. So there's no need to manually marry up those documents at the end of the process. The ability to create these documents is going to allow SMBs and even mid-sized businesses to support multi-channel fulfillment. So whether it's an e-commerce, a retail, or a drop ship type of shipment, you're going to have consistent compliant documentation across all order types. Now that's probably the least complex of the different type of documents we're looking to automate here. So getting into some of the more complex ones, we'll start off with hazmat automation. And this is going to be crucial to a business that's shipping any dangerous goods. Carriers are going to take advantage of companies in any chance they get to pass on as many types of operational and financial penalties as they can if things are shipped non-compliant. This is another area where the shipping solution must rely on the WMS to pass the correct shipment data. If it tells us that it's the incorrect hazmat code and we produce the incorrect type of label for it or don't identify certain things in that label, the carrier is going to penalize you. However, so where we can assist that WMS and not put full reliance on it is that we can implement custom business rules within our application. That's going to allow the system to automatically flag SKUs requiring hazmat documentation, or we can work with the WMS to have triggers or flags happen within that facilitation of data to ensure that there's not only one, but two firewalls, for lack of a better term, to ensure that we're including the correct label. Again, these are different than an oversized fee. It's different than different than some of the other accessorials you may see. These are going to be thousands and thousands of dollars if you're doing things incorrectly, and they might even penalize you and limit pickups because of it. The next part we want to get into is talking about international documentation. The goal here is working with a shipping provider. We want to make shipping internationally feel just like shipping domestically because the system's going to automatically handle the customs paperwork for you. Every country has its own regulations. When you're shipping to the EU or APAC or South America or Australia, it's completely different based on where that package is going. And it's extremely risky to expect warehouse staff to remember all of these rules, whether they're taped to a wall, wherever they might sit, or it's tribal knowledge. It's not the best tactic to have that employee remember everything to make sure you're remaining compliant. Again, with the help of business rules during implementation, we'll ensure that based on the destination country that's going to, your system's automatically generating the correct and compliant paperwork automatically with no manual intervention. That means no missing forms, no custom delays, and eventually huge time savings for your team so they can focus on other things rather than securing an ITN number, making sure a commercial invoice is filled out correctly, or anything like that.
I think that last part that you mentioned,
Absolutely.
like the time savings, I think that's actually probably the biggest thing that I would call out. And, Charles probably lives it more too with, if the WMS has to do these 3 extra things that the shipping software could, or sometimes if the shipping software has to do these 3 extra things that the WMS could do, finding that right balance, ultimately, you typically see a 20 to 30, maybe 40% like workflow efficiency gain in automating some of those processes. And it's not until you actually probably sit down and being like, oh, this only takes us 5 minutes, or it's the smaller, like softer wins, if you would, that I think add up to be the biggest like soft cost savings in combining the system. So it's very interesting, and I'll parallel back one last thing to carrier diversification. But when it comes to international, there's even carriers that'll differentiate themselves when it comes to international to make it easier, right? Less paperwork, or more enhanced custom clearance, or better visibility, or better time in transit, right? Duties and taxes, things like that. So shipping docs, I guess, is what everybody sees in the end. But the automated process workflow to get those out efficiently are, I guess, interconnected for sure. So.
Yeah, I would say, one
Yeah,
thing,
absolutely.
Eric, you mentioned at the beginning where, this is the most overlap. I would say this is where the most overlap needs to be, but potentially isn't. So that's where I think the two applications working together really will take care of that. There's so much opportunity, here, for a company to make progress in this area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. The next slide, if we don't have any final thoughts on this one, is visibility and measurement. Customers want to know where their order is and when it will get to them, and businesses need to track performance and speed. Charles, will you start us off on how small and mid-sized businesses can improve visibility and measurements?
Yeah, I mean, companies are really looking for visibility from beginning to end. And that's where the WMS really comes into play with all the touch points, at the beginning of the order, from the order entry all the way to the shipping side. That's where it has to come together, to eliminate the manual processes. Because if you eliminate the manual process, then you can eliminate poor deliveries. Poor deliveries equal poor customer satisfaction. So it's really just bringing everything together, in that mode. So, I mean, that's really what it's about. It's getting the integrations and the ties together to make sure that everything is seamless from beginning to end.
Eric, Tony, do you have anything to add? I just always think of webhooks. Like webhooks this year have become so much more prevalent in the industry because of what Charles was just saying, right? With, people want more and more tracking visibility. And so more and more carriers are supporting that.
Yeah, I think I always kind of liken this to like the WMS and kind of what Charles highlighted as far as, one source of the truth or efficiencies and through visibility and the WMS use case is more like strategic. Not that shipping reporting and shipping visibility isn't strategic, but it's a little bit more tactical, a little bit more focused in one particular area of helping customer service reps with like a where's my order or WISBO request. Sometimes it's emailing out carrier tracking details or proactively reaching out to your customers. In the end, I think carrier tracking or kind of like carrier performance management is a spend metric as well as a time and transit metric, which would be a performance that you would get through tracking, right? So I view it more as like what are the tactical day-to-day things that maybe kind of like shipping and WMS, right? WMS can give you more tactical like labor, workflow, how efficient was our team today, shifts and so on and so forth. But from a day-to-day like shipping perspective, I view it as more like a tactical reporting tool with the larger data set feeding back to the WMS to bring all of it together, to Charles' point as well. So I don't know if there's much more to go on off of that. I don't know, Eric or Charles, if you have any other thoughts, but I do think this is, to your point, Charles, earlier on the intersection for shipping docks where sometimes it isn't the case. This is sometimes a throwaway item for some shippers to not bring it back and make it full circle, right? It's the exhaustion. We got through the ERP project, we got through the WMS project, we got through the shipping project. Can't we just take a break real quick? And it's like you're missing that final link in the chain to make it all hum. So
yeah, I think the last thing I'd add is the line that we always use and we always talk about is, and I'm definitely butchering it, Tony, you say it a lot better than I can, is surrounding, we'll let you do with your data what you want to do with your data. Tell us what to do with it. So whether, like you said, that's sending it back to the WMS for them to leverage, whether that's utilizing some of our own dashboard reporting within the solution, or we're pushing it to a third-party analytics provider, we're never going to tell you what to do with the data, but you can tell us where to put it. And then from there, you can get as intricate as possible with it, whether you want to do carrier cost and contract management to help you at the table when you're to give you some more leverage when you're at the table, speaking with carriers the following year, whether you want on-time performance metrics to compare different carriers, things of that nature. I just think the ability to have that data stored within multiple systems and even send it to a special third-party analytics provider that you can get really detailed reports on is crucial to any business. And needs to be used in the spirit of minimizing as many costs as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Access to data is critical. I mean, we see it, dashboards are pretty, but what people want is data. So making sure that you have touch points and data and able to give those. I mean, that's one of the things that we do really well, is that we give people the data that they can leverage and manage and run their business with. That's a key component of our WMS.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. I am going to jump to the next slide if there's nothing else on this one for final advice and closing comments. So we've covered a lot of ground today. To wrap things up, I'd like to give our speakers a moment to share some final advice. Eric, we'll start with you. What is the most important thing you'd like our audience to take away from today's session?
Yeah, I think there's a industry-wide perception that large enterprises have always had advanced WMS and shipping tech stacks to automate cost control, and that SMBs don't. But what people don't realize is with the modernization of WMS and multi-carrier shipping tools, SMBs can now access that same optimization power without enterprise budgets.
Thanks. Charles, have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'd probably put it in two different buckets, one around risk and one around savings. So, on the risk side, I mean, you want a seamless flow of data, so that you don't have issues in the orders, issues in the shipping, which will cause late deliveries, increased labor costs, and brand, and risk to your brand. So I think, having these systems in place are key for that. And then on the savings side, again, having a multi-carrier solution and a diversified, carrier group will give you the ability to get savings that maybe you're not getting today.
Yeah. To wrap it up from my perspective,
Tony, what about you?
I think I'll go back to it's dynamic, right? It's ever evolving. It's a process that the projects do stop, right? It's not like just like a run-on project, but the monitoring, the tweaking, once you're up live and running with kind of ecosystem systems working together, you definitely shouldn't be tweaking it every day, but certainly monthly, quarterly, every 6 months, there's always constant improvements. And, sometimes, to your point, Charles, the savings will be there over time. Some savings are like immediate payback and you just got to go and get those. But some of it is like creating the opportunity to get that extra 10, 15% instead of the shortcut to only save that 10%, but you do the long way to save the 25%. So some of it is the use cases that's like snowball on themselves to get more efficiency gains, better savings, de-risk the operation. So it's dynamic and ever evolving would be my final kind of comment.
You just made me think of something. When it comes to like last week with the whole AWS thing, like that took down, some carriers, that took down some platforms, and with the, diversification with your carriers, that would help mitigate that, right? Like if you are having that type of an issue, having, diversified your portfolio, is key. And also there's so many different carriers that are, changing at a rapid speed nowadays, as opposed to what they used to do, right? We used to see so much less of changes, and now we're getting a change right before, peak season, so anyways, it's just ever evolving.
Yeah, I think we could do a similar, they should probably make a similar slide about carrier diversification and talking points that we did about cloud diversification, because it was tough to comprehend the amount of companies that were affected by that AWS outage. And I knew they had a large market share, but you didn't realize until that happens the amount of companies that are dependent on AWS, and how we talked about crippling fulfillment, how that can cripple your entire fulfillment network just because an external factor is out. I can't imagine being that Amazon employee that found that, but Yeah, that happens, changes the entire industry
My
for
phone
next.
was blowing up.
Yeah.
My phone was blowing up. It was crazy.
Tough
it,
day.
Are you guys
it is
impacted?
it is interesting, like the level of reliance for sure on that. But yeah, it goes back to Charles, like de-risking yourself, right? So for some of our shippers, like some carriers went offline, they had to leverage some other carriers, right? um and it definitely is a reminder of, like, business continuity, because it's not so much that it's like you can blame Amazon or whatever, but like CrowdStrike happened 2 years ago, right? Like there's other cyber events that occur that uh, inconvenience the supply chains for sure, if not just the apps on our
Yep.
phone that we're trying to look at, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. All right, enough there. So I will jump into, I know that there have been some questions flowing in. So I think it is time to start looking into those. Remember, if we do not get to your question today, please keep them coming in, because what we'll do is we will have somebody, reach out to you and answer those. So the first question I am going to give to the panelists today is, how do I compare the current WMS I'm running to other WMS platforms from a shipping perspective? And then there's kind of a follow-up to that. It says, does Sphere assist with a gap analysis? So, Charles, I think that one has to go to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we do is, we look at your business and how you're running your business today to determine, what should that WMS look like? Where do you need your connectivities, from beginning to end? What e-commerce platforms are you using? What, are you using QuickBooks? Is everything flowing, to and, from each one of those? And depending upon, like when you started, you may have outgrown your WMS. So that's exactly what we do is we do a gap analysis between your operational system and your WMS today to see if you're getting what you need. I mean, that's really what you have to do. You have to look at it and understand where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I have a shipping question here. Are there specific shipping features or carrier integrations that differentiate leading warehouse management system platforms?
I'll maybe take that one. So I wouldn't say like differentiate, like leading WMS platforms. I would say most WMS platforms now do support, a FedEx or UPS. I mean, it is a bit of like table stakes, but the ceiling gets reached very quickly as far as just those very basic point solutions, right? And I think, from a ProShip WorldLink perspective with Sphere, it's been really good to see like that ceiling is a heck of a lot higher for shippers, and there isn't the it just doesn't quite work like that, So WMS is obviously like have to support some out of the box WMS shipping capabilities from a parcel perspective, but it gets complex quick, and let those WMS companies be good at what they do, the WMS, not have to fake more enterprise or more complex parcel shipping requirements. So how I would summarize and answer that is the specific features of carrier integrations is most WMSs have the core carriers, but that's about it, right? So if you just need a label, that WMS is very capable to get that label out. If you've got rules, different billing types, different dropship requirements, international hazmat that Eric covered, I think that's what really differentiates together. So.
Yeah, Tony, to that point, I agree, the WMS will have the standard carriers coming right out of the box, but it really doesn't make sense for the WMS to do all these point integrations. It's much easier to go to a third party like you, integrate with your platform because you have that one-to-many relationship that we can take advantage of. Otherwise, it can get really cost prohibitive. If you look at them, like if you want to connect to 10 different carriers, all of a sudden, then they're going to go, I can't afford to do that. But not realizing that that we can go to your application and get everything that they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail. The only thing I would add, Charles, is if you need a label, like Tony said, any WMS or most out there are going to be able to do it for you, but the issues arise when change is needed. So not only do they now want to connect to a regional carrier beyond their UPS and FedEx dependence, or there's been large changes within UPS and FedEx. A shipping solution is specifically geared towards servicing the shipping industry for shipping execution. WMSs are focusing on other things. So they're not going to be necessarily as quick to apply all these various changes to the ever-changing shipping market, whereas a solution like ours, pairing it with the WMS will help you to achieve both.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. You guys made me think of, like, with the holiday season coming and all the diversification, like I got a VHO label the other day, and normally I don't get those. And then it's like they're just, some of these smaller carriers are just really, really starting to show up, and it's nice to see them before peak season. So it looks like, people are testing out the waters with new carriers before things get really busy.
Yeah, Gila, to
All
that
right.
point.
So the next
Well, Gila, one more thing.
one that I have is,
Gila, I think you cut out here. Charles was going to jump in.
Yeah, I mean,
am I back?
Your point there, on the carriers. I think, like, if you would have thought, 5 years ago, there's going to be, somebody in a Honda Accord showing up at my house dropping off a package, and it's not going to be FedEx or UPS or coming in the mail, we would never dream that would happen. But that just shows how the carrier landscape has changed rapidly, over the last 5 years, and now it's commonplace. So shippers, want to take advantage of that, and so it's changed just dramatically. And I think, we'll see if it continues to change or how it evolves, but things are always evolving in that space. And, with ProShip, they're going to be ahead of it. They're going to have it under control. They're going to have the connections that we need, on the forefront, where, from a WMS and just a manufacturer or shipper or on the WMS side, we're not going to have that. And generally, our customers aren't going to have that. So you have to rely on the expert to really handle it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good call out.
Yeah, I think, Gila, with what you were saying, the last thing I would add about VHO, little personal anecdote. My apartment building that I live in, it has a public drop area for all parcel packages. It's not like it's parcel lockers where specific apartments get access to it. And I think I'm becoming a little bit of a parcel nerd in the sense that every time I enter the building, I'm taking a look at every package. It's like, oh, we got a uni today, or it's a VHO today. And it's the stuff that I never would have thought, like you're saying, Charles, I would have thought for myself to be doing, but I continue to do it every day, more and more.
Yeah, another thing, I mean, from the carrier space, you think these companies are going to stay in business forever, but we had an integration with a carrier that was a nationwide carrier, and then one day they shut their doors, gone. And if you didn't have the diversification, then your business was going to be just extremely impacted. So again, it goes back to diversification. You really need that.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys made me laugh because I'm in the shipping industry. My husband's not. And I am doing the same thing as you are, Eric, is like, I'm evaluating these packages and seeing, okay, do they have dock tabs at the bottom, or is this our label? So it's just funny. All right. Anyways, the next question we have is, how do you help smaller companies with limited resources navigate the complexity of software projects like a warehouse management system implementation?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, I mean, when we're talking to a prospect or a customer, that's where we really get in detail to understand how they're running their business, what they're doing and how they're doing it. This week we talked to somebody that is looking to implement, a WMS, and that they don't have. And so we're proposing more operational, how they should do it. And then within the system, how they're going to leverage the system to accomplish what they want. So it's really a consultative approach and finding the right fit and the right different modules within the system that they need, which are important. Because you may not need everything, and that's where we can help you to really take something that could be massive and scale it down to it's what you need to get implemented and started. So it's really a consultative approach.
Absolutely. Eric, Tony, do you have anything you want to add to that one?
I mean, IT resources just at a premium, right? Large or small. So, I mean, I think, having some foresight and some plan, and then, it's a challenge, I would say, to shippers on the call. Like, some of it is just like, kind of dedicating that focus, right? It's hard to do, and it's hard to get into that mode of like change is not easy. And so like that's what I would kind of liken it to, of like, follow the process, trust the experts, lean in. And then you got to dedicate yourself, and well, not yourself, but you got to dedicate time and money and resources to make sure it's successful. And it's hard. It's not just like an easy snap of a finger. There are some easy buttons out there in the world, but supply chain, you might search your whole career for one and not find one. Supply chain is tough, right? It's a challenge. So,
Yeah, and to add to that, from a prospect standpoint, we see people that want to do, either remote implementations versus on-site. But I can tell you, having somebody come on-site to evaluate your business, to walk the floor, to see how you do things from beginning to end, that is so valuable, and it pays dividends, down the road. So, like if you're a young company or just getting into a WMS, you really need to have somebody on site to really look at it from a third-party view that's seen a lot of implementations, to help you get through the process and to really guide you.
Yeah. I also think too, even I call it water cooler talk. Like when you're on site, you guys are having conversations and talking about things and really like getting into the brass tacks. And sometimes when you're, not on site and you're talking about a flow, the other, the people that you're partnering with, need to conceptualize, how does this actually flow? What are you actually doing? Whereas when you're on site, you can actually see it and ask questions and, ask more questions and get more into depth with stuff. And then, over lunch, right, you can talk about it more to, just get more involved. So there is something to be said about on-site that I think the industry, all industries for that matter, have kind of gotten away from a little bit. So good call out on that. Anything else on that one?
I don't think so.
All right. The next one I see here is, when is the best time of year that you have seen a warehouse management system deployment occur? Like, what would the ideal timing be?
Well, I'll start out. I'm sure everybody's got an opinion on this one. Because it really, because you have typical busy season, which we're in the heat of right now, and most people don't want to implement right now. So you would think, fourth quarter, okay, we're not going to do it. Generally, people that we're talking to, they're targeting Q1, and so they're thinking, okay, I want to make a decision, by the end of the year, start implementing Q1, be up and going Q2. That way, I'm ready for Q3, Q4 next year, and that's probably normal, but. I'll also say, like, if you're a company that is dealing with summer goods, outdoor furniture, or things that are sold in the summer, then your busy season is completely different. For them, they're shipping in, March and April. So therefore, right now is the time of year that they want to do implementations. So it really depends on, the product mix that you have, who you're servicing. And, we'll do whatever's right for the customer. For us, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think obviously the larger WMS system is going to take a little bit more. I don't even want to say like more time. It's more foundational of a system. There's just more things that go on, right? But at the same time, just because the shipping software is an add-on doesn't mean it's less complex either, right? And so I think it goes back to kind of like buying in and making, your time is an investment. You can view it as money, right? But your time is an investment, and proper planning to then go and execute is just equally as important as when you execute, right? Ideally, Q1, Q2 is perfect. Get out of the way early so you're not, on a webinar in October, right before peak, trying to do a project, right? So, but I think it's the pre-planning and partnership. I mean, that can start early and often for sure. So,
Well, it gives you more time to test, right? Or like be live with the product before your peak season really starts. So you can kind of get some of those bugs out. Something maybe, you thought you tested everything, but you got this one customer that you forgot ships these packages at this time, and you forgot something. So you're still giving yourself time for the unknowns as well. Anything else on that one? All
Nope.
right. All right. The next one is related to shipping. If I'm only using one carrier today, how would I go about adding new carriers and finding which ones are a good fit for me?
Yeah, I think I can start off with that one. I'm sure Tony and even Charles will want to jump in after, but so the easiest thing to consider is price, right? Obviously, everyone wants to go with another carrier that can present competitive pricing. But when you're initially coming to the table, you have to understand your business too. If you're shipping, I'll use Charles' example, outdoor furniture, you're probably not sprinting to have a conversation with a USPS rep. It's just not a fit. So when it gets into it, it's not only about the pricing you get, it's going to be about what SKUs, what's your business like, where are you shipping? Are certain carriers going to give you better pricing on certain zones than others? So there's a lot more that goes into it rather than, this carrier seems big, they have large coverage, let's see what they can give us. You have to consider how your business differs from other and do what's best for you.
Yeah, I think kind of tackling that head on in some of the carrier negotiations, right? I mean, so carriers will be open as far as what package they really want and what they not, right? And they'll typically price out the stuff that they don't want, right? I'll kind of liken this with just like we're seeing obviously a huge push with post office with some of their kind of repivoting the last 2 years. Amazon is certainly coming into the space. And we mentioned some of the regionals, right? On track, VHO, Better Trucks. I'm going to leave a regional carrier off. So, any regional carriers, I apologize if on this webinar, I apologize if I didn't name you. But there are a ton of good value added regional carriers that own their niche very well. So the most kind of commonly used ones that we're seeing are, really across the board. It just depends on the shipper. So do your research. It's okay if you talk to 20 carriers if you only need to add 2. Obviously, just if you have enough time in the day to do so. So.
All right. Well, I think that might be all the time that we have for today. Thanks to our panelists, Tony, Charles, Eric. Really appreciate you joining us today and taking the time. I know with this being, right up against peak, you guys are busy. So I really, really appreciate the time today. And also thank you to all of the attendees that joined us today. If we didn't get to your question and, somebody will be reaching out to you to answer those questions to ensure you guys get taken care of. So thanks again for everyone joining, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.